The '69 Dodge Charger cruised down the road at a steady 60 miles per hour, 15 over the legal speed limit, but Silas didn't care. She had been pushing limits and boundaries since she could remember. The sports tires ate up the road, kicking dirt and tossing it aside while leaving behind its trail of debris. The engine roared as she pushed the gas pedal down further. It was a thrill she reveled in. Imminent Mortality, a metalcore band she had been obsessed with since she was 13, blasted through the speakers as she tapped on the steering wheel in sync with the heavy drum breakdown. Her freshly dyed fire engine red locks swirled around while a chilled breeze danced across her face. Fall was in full swing. She rolled the window all the way down, allowing the air to flow over her arm, giving her the feeling of flying while she cruised down the road, enjoying her freedom. The coolness felt soothing on her freshly finished tattoo sleeve. At the age of 24, she had all she needed. The sun warmed her face as it began to set over the mountains. Orange, pink, and purple swirls of color intrinsically adorned the sky like a Van Gogh painting. The Charger continued on, hugging the curves of the road through the deep woods, flowing with the turns effortlessly. She adjusted her rearview mirror, suddenly startled to see a faceless hooded figure adorning a black robe, pointing at her while standing near the curb she passed. A vision instantaneously planted in her mind of a bloody woman encased in tree vines screaming for her life, hit her like a truck. Whispers and disembodied voices plunged her mind while dark and disturbing images invaded her thoughts. Without warning, a sharp shot of pain pierced her temples, traveling down through her ears abruptly, making her feel like her head was being squeezed between a vice. She cupped her forehead, regaining her composure while trying to focus on driving and glance back to see where the figure was standing, only to find the spot was vacant. Her rapidly beating heart gradually regaining its normal momentum as she continued down the road, the pain slowly easing. She shook her head. What the hell? She bit down on her black-chipped fingernail, making every effort to calm her nerves while reflecting on the past 48 hours since she left her apartment. The eviction sign swung off a rusty nail as she slammed the door, giving one last middle finger to the crappy apartment complex. Her ex-landlord peeked out from the window from behind a sheer white curtain as if it wasn't obvious enough, making sure she left for good. She smiled triumphantly, glad to be rid of the dump, and got into her car. She grasped the apartment keys in her palm, contemplating spitefully keeping them just so he would have to change the lock, but instead raised her arm back and chucked them as hard as she could at his office window. They sailed through the air in perfect harmony, aligned with his chubby mustache face, making a huge whap against the glass, causing him to jump back. Silas grinned, remembering the look on his pathetic face as she did a donut in the parking lot and sped off, dust swiftly forming an enormous brown cloud covering all the cars parked at the complex. A new song came on, breaking up the flood of memories and averting her attention back to the road. She was hoping she would come upon some kind of hotel soon. Driving 2 days straight probably wasn't the best idea. Her stomach rumbled, almost taking over the music. 5:35. Yeah, I know. If you're going to listen to this band, at least ask me which song I want to listen to. Silas jumped in her seat, accidentally turning the wheel, nearly causing the car to clip the guardrail. She abruptly pulled over onto the curb and stared at her unexpected companion sitting next to her. Blake? What the hell are you doing here? Well, that's not a nice way to react to someone you haven't seen in a few years, he smirked, running his hand through his jet black undercut. You didn't answer my question, she said through her teeth. He laughed while peering outside and flipping his lucky quarter in his hand. He tilted his head towards her, looking thoroughly amused, his onyx-colored eyes illuminating at the sheer anger that beheld her face. Silas punched the steering wheel, growing more and more furious by the minute. Damn it, Blake! Answer me! He sighed heavily. You know, you're just really no fun anymore. He shrugged and gazed back outside to the scenic view of the fall leaves and pink-red sky. Someone left her meds on the kitchen table back at her shitty apartment complex. He continued, fiddling with the quarter, rolling it between his index finger and thumb. Silas sat back and slouched, sinking into the seat, feeling fully annoyed and disappointed in herself for leaving the one thing she needed. I take it you're not happy to see me, then? He smiled triumphantly at her, almost looking childlike in his adult age. I've really missed you. If I could punch you, I would. Her eyes practically shifted from hazel to an ominous ebony. Well, isn't this one big, happy, hellish reunion? The words of disdain hung from her lips, while her stern face flushed with the heat of animosity. Ah, there now. You'll see in time you're happy I'm back. His grin was as big as the moon. Annoyance hung on her while he flipped the quarter back and forth. The slapping noise on the back of his hand seemed to grow louder with the level of her discontent. As soon as I have my money to get my meds, you're gone. His attention was momentarily redirected to her upper thigh and the oversized hole in her ripped jeans that adorned a tattoo of the Bride of Frankenstein making a horns gesture. New to the collection, huh? She gave him a dirty look. None of your damn business, and stop scanning me, you weirdo. Her lip curled upward, glaring at him. I guess I'm stuck with you. She sighed heavily, the words repeating in her head. His smile broadened while he continued to flip the quarter in the air, smacking it on the back of his hand harder. He nodded at her. She scowled at him, recalling he could hear her thoughts. Ugh, no privacy anymore either. He laughed aloud. His obnoxiousness was infuriating, but not as aggravating as all the times he would get in her head and make her do bad things like vandalizing the outside of her school, or the time when he made her knife several cars in the grocery store parking lot just for fun. He was pure evil. He continued flipping the quarter, purposely getting under her skin more and more. His gaze averted back to her. Just remember, sometimes monsters hunt us, and sometimes we are the monsters. She flipped him off and pulled back onto the road, hitting the gas pedal hard, the tires squealing and muting the thought of the urge to drive the car into a tree, praying for a concussion. That would temporarily get rid of him. They continued down the road in silence, her focus on finding a place to eat and sleep for the night. The sun was near setting. Darkness soon would be enclosing around her. Her nerves deepened and frayed in the pit of her stomach with every minute the sky deepened in darkness. That's when she saw things. Horrible things. Without her medication, the monsters in her head were no longer in her head now. They were alive, and they knew. And worse, Blake was back. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. She swallowed hard, trying her best to mute her mind. She gritted her teeth, not daring to glance over at him, knowing that Blake was taking full pleasure in her worry and frustration. The pink sky had transformed to an apocalyptic shade of red, while the surrounding woods twisted into a dark and evil presence. The tall trees shifted before her eyes, appearing menacing and grotesque. Her apprehension grew. Time was running out fast. Each mile she drove felt like an eternity, with no hope of seeing anything reminiscent of a hotel or a safe place to stay. Every voice in her head deafening, accompanied by more dark visions of bloody creatures roaming the woods, hungry to prey upon anything that crossed their path. Images of bodies that hung from the trees, reaching out towards her, screaming and laughing as they stared at her. The crimson red beams of light swelled brighter, outlining their decrepit forms. The thin veil between reality and delusion wreaked havoc in her mind. Come on, Silas. You can control this. A dense fog manifested, lifting from the ground, and obscured her view from the road. A chill crept down her neck, trailing down her back, making her whole body shudder. She let off the gas, even though every impulse in her wanted to push through the obscurity of the dense woods. Brief flashes of black shadows darting through the forest on either side of the road grazed her peripheral vision. Her muscles tensed, gripping the wheel tighter, her knuckles white from squeezing so hard. The voices plunging in and out of her ears distracted her focus from the road. She slowed the Charger to a crawl, gravel barely bouncing off the tires. Condensation built on the glass as the fog encased her. No. Her words, barely audible, slipping from her lips while tension and angst burgeoning inside of her. She wiped the windshield frantically with her hand to no avail, silently cursing herself for not getting the radiator and condenser fixed before she left. The engine sputtered while smoke rose from the hood. A deep anger rose in her to curse Blake out for messing with her car. She swung her head towards him to find the passenger seat abandoned. The voices grew louder, pummeling at her eardrums repeatedly and nearly overcoming her. She struggled to focus. Her hands instinctively covered her ears while she bit on her tongue to distract herself. She threw her fists into the seat, repeatedly punching harder until bloody contusions adorning her knuckles appeared. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, her heart thumping so loud she swore it transitioned to her head. What was it her therapist said? Focus, Silas. The fog separated just enough to see a few feet away. The cardinal-colored beams of light de-alienated the trees, highlighting the distant outline of a man adorning a backpack and hiking gear walking into the trail that said "Do not enter." Silas jumped up, unbuckling her seatbelt, banging on the window and yelling at him to stop. She scrambled to grab the door handle, yanking on it hard and thrusting the door wide open. She needed help.